Hey everyone, this is Ian, aka Collector Emitter, and you are watching, or rather listening to, the August episode of the podcast that I do on my Patreon. If you haven't seen one of these yet, basically when I have an episode with a guest, which I'm trying to do more and more, I will post that episode on YouTube 2 weeks delayed. But if you want that in your podcast feed, or if you want to get the bonus episode that's live today on the Patreon, you can just sign up over there on the Patreon at any price. There's no tiers currently, and you'll get that podcast, be able to listen to that. This conversation is with Matt from Ambienttrash, and it's a really great conversation about how he makes demos and kind of a look behind the curtain into some of the demo process, the demo mindset of like what we're trying to do when we put together demos. And that's something I want to do more, have other people who make demos on the podcast, kind of a inside perspective of two people making demos talking about it. So on Patreon, if you want to go over there, we had a great conversation about how we write music and how we do that separately with a band or solo. That was a lot of fun as well. But otherwise, just enjoy the episode. Hey, and welcome to the August 2023 episode of the Collector Emitter Patreon podcast. I don't really have any updates for the Patreon this month, mainly because you might have seen already by the time you listen to this podcast, I'm going to try and start doing a Patreon newsletter at least every other week, just updates on what I'm filming, if I can share that, or if not, other things that are going on with the podcast or the Patreon or anything else. So any updates I'll leave there, and I will just get right into it with the guest that I have for this episode, which is Matt from Ambienttrash. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking the time.
Of course.
I've been excited to have... you're the first person who does demos that I've had on the podcast, but I'm excited to do more. Nice. This is also only like I think you're like the fourth guest.
Okay.
I'm still getting a bit into the hang of the scheduling. That's the tough part.
Yeah.
And so
it helps that we're on a lot of the same stuff. So you already know when I'm busy.
Yeah, exactly. So, for everyone listening, I messaged Matt this week and was like, hey, I know my schedule of demos is light right now. That means yours is probably light right now. Do you want to do the podcast? And it was exactly right. So, that helps. But, I really appreciate you being on, and I'm looking forward to, I think I've listened to episodes of, some of the other pedal or guitar podcasts out there with people who do demos. And it's like somebody who's just curious about what doing demos is like. And so you get the same story from everybody. And so I think what can be cool with this is talking about like what's so different about, the format of, between you and I, it's so different. And then hopefully when I can talk to some other people, everybody's format is so different and their process and kind of, getting to compare, kind of pulling back the curtain a bit.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny. You mentioned everyone's story. Like, yeah, it is definitely the same for me. It's like, yeah, like I started the Instagram page like December 2019, like literally just because I'd gotten a bunch of pedals for the band I was in and was messing with ambient sounds to fill space in the set. And right. At some point was just like, yeah, doing demos would be cool. And like I had done one really rough one for Caden at Black Mass he's a longtime friend, and that was his first production pedal, the Missionary Fuzz V1. So yeah, like going into it, had basically not done anything, and then eventually he came out with the 1312 summer 2020, and was like, "Hey, you want to do a demo?" I was like, "Yeah," and that. It went well. It was really scrappy, I think, on my part. Edited the whole thing on my phone and whatnot,
Oh,
but
wow.
yeah, I don't recommend it.
So did you record audio into your phone? Like, did you do everything on the phone then, or was it
Oh,
just
oh no, not everything. Okay,
okay?
so
Okay.
I did essentially what I do now, which is I write a track, I record it, and then I go back and make the video. Like sometimes now, like I'm equipped to do things live, like on the fly, like
Right.
actual live playing on video. But honestly, more often than not, and I hope this doesn't like ruin it for anyone, but like yeah, most of the time I just play along to the
Yeah.
recorded track because there's just no way I'm gonna get some of that stuff down in a live take in any reasonable amount of time.
That makes so much
But
sense. I mean,
but
I feel like I've streamlined my filming process as much as possible, but even then, the biggest use of time, like I think I could film within like maybe 10 minutes longer than what the demo actually was if I got everything right on the first take.
nice.
But I can't do that. It takes me an hour to film, and that edits down to like 12-minute video. And so much of
Yeah.
that time is just I have the part written, I'm playing it, and it's just I mess up or it's like it's something's not working, and I have to like just tweak the one knob to get it just right. And like especially if that's like I'm playing something, changing a control, and then I play again. If I mess up down the line, I have to like it has to sync to the video, so I have to redo everything. So
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
even consider that just because I think with everything else I do, like if I see a TikTok of someone playing guitar, like there's these two guys that have gone viral a couple times where it's like they're sitting next to each other and the one's playing guitar and then it's just like a simple chord progression and they sing two different songs over it, and say like these two songs are actually the same. And the videos are
Oh
kind
yeah.
of
Yeah.
corny, but I'm always like, I'm curious what they've like they have a good ear of like what actually is like goes well together. And so I just fast forward to what's the second song that they layer on. So I don't, get stuck watching the whole thing. But I'm always like, I know they're just playing along. It's so obvious. There's like perfect reverb on their vocals and they're auto tuned and everything. But I guess
Yeah.
because it's a demo, I never once thought that you weren't playing, which is
Well, I
a
I am
compliment to
so
the quality of how everything lines up.
I am so happy to hear that. But yeah, at some point I was just like early on, I really tried to do that. Well, I mean, those first few demos, like I filmed those up in my attic because I was like, yeah, that'll be cool. It's like hot as shit up there in the middle of summer in
Yeah.
Seattle, and it was not cool. So I stopped doing that. So yeah, then after that for a bit, I tried to do everything like live on camera, and I just could not do it. So just like this is gonna take me forever. I'm just gonna record the track, play along, even if somebody eventually like somehow figured out that I wasn't playing live. Like it's not like I'm trying to say I'm like playing Through the Fire and Flames or something.
Right.
Like I'm not gonna like. Why would I want to fake my like 3 chord song?
Well, and also it's like that doesn't invalidate that you did record that part with that guitar through that. Like the information of what's important in the demo is the same. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I mean, that makes so much sense. So, yeah, actually, already it's so funny. You started by saying your story is pretty much the same. And then the first thing you said was you made an Instagram account for just like posting about gear and like posting like small videos. And that's something like that I still use my personal Instagram. It's just become the collector emitter Instagram. And so I would like see, especially around like 2020, when I'm sure a lot of people had more time to, mess around with this kind of stuff. Yeah. They're just like fully here. I'm starting, it's a new account where I only, post my gear. And I was like, that's such an interesting, like I never thought to use Instagram that way.
Yeah, I guess I didn't either. Like, yeah, it was partly like wanting to just have a separate place, and it was also honestly like basically my whole life I've done this, where it's one of those things where I get very into something and then get like a little embarrassed by how into it I am.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm gonna just like quietly move this stuff over here. It was never like a secret page or anything. I just like told some music friends, and I like maybe posted about it once or twice, and then just kind of let it go on, do its thing. And then it kind of snowballed, and now it's like at a point where I don't want to go back and be like, hey, by the way, for the past 3 years, I've been doing this thing.
Right.
But yeah, that's how that started. It was just, I'm gonna keep this away from all the people who don't care about it, or who I think don't care about it. But yeah, everyone's been very supportive. It's totally just me and that little bit of embarrassment that comes with being super into something.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially because like how I would use Instagram before I started making demos, but then especially when the demos were kind of taking off, was, like I said, it's my personal Instagram, and I was just posting like, oh, I got this new pedal, and then like a friend of mine from high school that I haven't talked to in 5 years or whatever would like it, and looks cool, man. And it's like, yeah, it just has this like weird embarrassing thing of like I swear I could talk about something different in real life. I just don't feel like posting about everything. So I'm only posting about this stuff. So yeah, maybe the separation is kind of helpful to not have it take over. Do you ever feel like, this might be a weird question, but do you ever feel like it's kind of like a secret identity, like when you're just talking to somebody in real life?
Yes. For a while, like I kind of thought that early on, and I was like, I'm just some dude that posts videos on the internet.
Right.
And then like once I started doing more like regular stuff, like doing a demo or two every month, and like got into maybe like the thousands of followers or so, I was just like this is like kind of a thing. Like I do this as a side job, and so yeah, it's a thing. And yeah, when I talk to someone who I either don't know, or someone I know personally who maybe doesn't know that I do that stuff on the side,
right?
Like, yeah, it's weird. It kind of, like a little before that, I kind of got like really fascinated with like the idea of context collapse, which I'm not sure is like a scientific term. It's just something I kind of like happened upon on the internet.
So,
but it's just like,
what is I feel like I've heard the term before. I feel like I kind of get it, but I'll say for the listener's sake, but truly for myself a little bit too, what is context collapse?
It's so I don't have the paper in front of me, but
but just like in the way that you think about it.
Yeah, like my understanding, it's like it's a very like internet age thing, where it's just the idea that like when you have, say, like Facebook, like a very central like home base for everyone, or at least at one point it was that, until people started kind of moving away from it. Like, just when you have that kind of a platform where there's all these different people, from very different circles, like your family, your friends, your coworkers, like your just acquaintances, someone you met at like a show once or something, like these people all know you in completely different contexts, and
Yeah.
you get to a point where you just like don't know how to act around, like in a place where you're visible to all of them. And so yeah, that's just something I thought about a lot ever since I became kind of more aware of how different the like new like big internet was, where kind of everyone's in the same place.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's something I bet everyone with some type of even niche internet following thinks about that, even like me thinking about that without putting that name to it. But it is this weird thing of like I see if I post, because my Instagram account is just my personal account still, if I post like a picture of myself, I get likes from people. It's like, oh wait, that person that I knew from this thing still follows me, And it's
Yeah.
like I feel like it's people who I just always wonder, like even when I've met friends and like, oh, it's like I want to keep in touch with you, but I don't want you to follow me on Instagram. Like it became this weird thing, and so like I just think about all the people I know that know nothing about music or anything and have pedals in their feed regularly. Yeah, it's a really
I
bizarre
yeah I
experience.
yeah I like I can't imagine just somebody being on there and just like scrolling and like you see like a microcosm or something. You're like, is that a medical device that
Right.
you're selling or something? Like, yeah, it's just a weird niche that like people outside of it don't even really like. People might know what pedals are vaguely, like they're little boxes that guys step on stage, but like they don't really know what they are. And it's funny, like I have friends or like family who follow me who aren't necessarily guitarists. They just want to see what I'm up to. And when I see them or talk to them, they're just like, yeah, I don't know what any of that means, but it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this very odd thing. And yeah, my parents have like, oh yeah, like my mom will like if I call my parents, my mom will say like, oh yeah, I really liked that video you posted the other day. It's just like based on
Yeah.
the sound, it's like, oh, that's an interesting one from the outside. And I even had a friend ask me once what a pedal was, and I was like confused and thought like, was it kind of like a philosophical question of like what defines the category? But no, she like just genuinely was like, what are you talking about? And so I went on
Yeah.
this long answer, and then I was like, oh, it changes what the guitar sounds like.
Yeah. I like, oh my God. Yeah. For like as long as I've been doing the demo thing more like regularly, yeah, I've spent a lot of time just like figuring out how to distill down the answer to like what is it that you do here. And that is basically just I make videos for people who make music gear, and that's the easiest way that I can put it to most people and have them get what it is.
Yeah, that's a lot better than. I feel like I get a little rambly about it because I'm like, oh yeah, I make these videos and they're kind of like showing what this thing that this like small, like one person small business makes, and then it's like, oh wait, but it's like guitar gear, but it's not like everything. I I've never been able to make it that concise, so that's good.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh, so you're an influencer.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny. That's why I asked about the secret identity, because I will like some of my friends will kind of like joke that I'm an influencer, but then I've had people genuinely ask like, "Oh, like what do you do? Like you're an influencer. Like, what do you do? Or I've had like normal conversations, like I go to a guitar store with a friend and I'm having just a normal conversation about pedals with the guy who works there. And my friend's like, this guy is actually really big on YouTube. He makes pedal demos. It's like it didn't need to be said.
Yeah. It's a weird thing, just like the idea of like just the idea of micro fame that's
Yeah.
possible in like the social media age. It's a really weird thing to be in. I mean, I enjoy it for sure. The community around it is really great, and it's an awesome platform where I can just kind of do what I want and just write music that I don't necessarily have to like commit the energy of, say, a band or like a formal project. Like I don't have to commit that kind of energy to it. It's just a 1 minute, 1.5 minute song that is what I was feeling at the time, and it's out there, and I get to do the next thing. I don't have to finish a song, write lyrics, and do all of that stuff. Like it's great in that way to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That is kind of, I've, I obviously don't do the full song for my demos. And so I've never thought like when
Which I'm gonna keep saying you should.
I have thought about it. I've thought like for the shoegaze videos, I could do that, but then those are the easiest videos to do right now because I just come up with like essentially like a 3-part structure and play it, and then the edit is so easy because there's not multiple clips. And if I do the song, it would be more time into those, but I think it could be fun. So I go back and forth on it, but
Yeah, you were one person who of a few who, when I talked to you guys about like just different formats and stuff, it's like, yeah, having different formats for these videos is something that can be really helpful and just like keep things fresh. So yeah, I've been exploring not doing songs.
yeah,
Unfortunately, it's been hard to get people to bite on that offering,
right.
because people want the songs, and I am super glad that people want to hear like the songs that I write for them. But I'm also like, I want to do something a little bit easier just for a little bit. I'm drowning.
Yeah.
I'm not going to complain. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it is a lot to constantly be doing. But it is like you said, it's like always being able to finish and move on. You don't like, or actually maybe I should say this as a question. Do you go back and like think, "Oh, I could change this part or like fix this thing or fix the mix a little bit or whatever, like all those things that happen when you're writing music. Do you do that with the demos, or is it kind of like I got to keep moving, so I can't think about that?
I've never really thought about that consciously, but I'm sure I do it. I'm sure I have done it. Like I'm just a perfectionist in that way. So yeah, I'm sure I've gone back to videos and been like, yeah, I think I could have done that a little differently. I could have shown that particular sound in a different way, or maybe I could have mixed this differently to make that thing come out better. But overall, like I have a lot easier time just kind of letting things exist in the way that I put them out with demos, as opposed to like songs that I've put out
Right.
under various music projects in the past. So yeah, I think that was a really valuable thing about doing the demo thing, was just that it taught me to let things just be quick and dirty, and I don't want to say good enough, but just like let it be something that I can be satisfied with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's, I think, what I've gotten the most out of it, beyond being able to try so much gear and, get such a knowledge of like every, like I have like an encyclopedia in my brain of every pedal at this point. But the best part is I can just keep moving and I'm making music in a way, but it doesn't have to be like something that I agonize over.
Totally. And I got diagnosed with ADHD last year, which made perfect sense. But then it also is like, oh, this is actually kind of the perfect kind of thing for me to be in for like if I had to pick like a side job. I don't really think of it that way, but it is. But it's really something that just keeps things moving, and there's always some kind of like novelty factor to whether it's something just a new thing to play with or if it's just something I haven't tried at all before. Like it just satisfies the constant need for novelty.
Yeah.
And so I'm thankful for that about it too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't have ADHD, but with the boredom of the full lockdown period of COVID,
Oh yeah.
getting one or two or more pedals in the mail every week, because for like most of 2020, I did at least 2 videos a week. I was like going for it just as something to do because I was so I just needed something. And so, that like kept the always having something new to play kind of kept that like creeping dread away for that period of time, which was very helpful.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think in those early, like the first 6 months or so of it, where everything was like really uncertain and like really stressful. And I was living in suburban California. So my experience, I'm sure, was very different from you because you were still in New York City at the time, right?
Yeah.
I
And
want to say.
so I had an apartment in New York for the entirety of, all through COVID. But there was
Yeah.
a large period of time where I would spend time with my parents in rural Pennsylvania just because,
Okay.
then I could have more of that. I'm not going to see anybody if I go outside experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. But yeah, it was very much like a comfort kind of thing where I would go to work, and then as soon as we were like working from home, it was like I get off the computer, go into the other half of my 1 bedroom apartment at the time, and just like play. And at that point, I wasn't doing demos really. I was just recording soundscapes and whatnot because that was
Right.
the new and novel thing to me. So I would do that like literally every day, just like a minute long clip, which yeah, that got to be a lot. And I just wanted to do more. And so I would do something a little more involved. Maybe it was different editing, or I tried the green screen thing, which I
Yeah.
totally ripped from you. And yeah, it's just trying to find new things to do all the time. And then that's what eventually got me doing demos in the form that I do now.
Yeah. That's interesting. That like those steps all kind of align. It's like, oh yeah, let me just do a little bit more and a little bit more, and that eventually turns into writing a full song every week, and you're doing, all of it.
Yeah, yeah. I have a bad habit of just like getting myself into things that I don't think are going to be a big undertaking. And so the whole songwriting model, or just the format of the demos that I do, are admittedly kind of an awful business model because they are so just there's no way to quantify it as far as like the time that it takes.
Yeah.
I can limit myself to maybe a night or two if I'm really busy. Or I'm like I need to come up with an idea that I'm rolling with within these next 2 nights, and that works sometimes. But yeah, it's been a big exercise in time management for myself in a way that my day job doesn't necessarily do. It's still like it's still hourly work. I'm a graphic designer and web designer
Right.
for a day job, so it is like billed by the hour, and so we have to be conscious of that. But it's just very different when I'm working with basically just my evenings and weekends
Yeah.
and
The
doing it
time has
myself.
like very different, even though like an hour on, Saturday versus an hour on Monday afternoon are like two different lengths in your mind.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So my main question that I wanted to ask, I try to like have somewhat of a topic for the
Yeah.
episodes. My main question was about kind of that process of writing the songs. I'm curious, just because it's something that I don't do, but also because I'm sure, like I see so many people when you post your videos saying like, "Oh, the song sounded amazing," and I'm sure they're then thinking like,
Mhm.
"Oh, how could I do that?" Just like your like start to finish process of like, does it start with just a riff that the pedal is inspiring, and then you kind of build out around that? Are you just trying to write a song that suits like the type of pedal that it is, and then fit the pedal in with different settings?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there could be so many approaches to like both writing a short song every week and incorporating one pedal into every part in a song.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is all of the approaches. um, yeah, because I just get so scatterbrained, and I try to let myself just be scatterbrained because that's just what I do naturally, and that's often how I come up with my best stuff. But it can also be a hindrance. So there's definitely a kind of a fallback formula for it, for those times where I just really need to come up with something.
Yeah.
And that's been helped a lot by, I guess, like my day job in design, and we can get into that a bit later. I know we wanted to talk about kind of peripheral topics there, but yeah, as far as the demo like song process, yeah, like you said, it very often starts with like just a riff. Like I'll when I get the pedal and when it's time to really start in earnest with it, like I'll just sit and play with it for a night or two, and just figure out what it does, how it sounds best, and what feels good to play through it as far as my style goes. And from there, usually something jumps out. There's a riff or just like a little lick or a melody that sounds good through it. And so I will track that. And from there, it's kind of amorphous. Like that might be the beginning, like the intro of the
Right.
song, or maybe that sounds more like a bridge or something. So I will just kind of piece it together from wherever I started. And usually that's usually that's doable once I've got the first piece in. Sometimes I have to kind of just give myself a kick by either maybe laying down just drum tracks for a few sections, or maybe even a bass track just to set some kind of outline, so I'm not just shooting in the dark.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a lot of times the structure isn't, you're not like, I guess I'm just connecting it to how my brain thinks. So I think a lot like when I'm writing a song, or like for the Park Garden batch videos that I do,
Yeah.
that's essentially writing that 1 minute song. I'll start with basically a chord progression, or just like, the main thing, but there's like, because this is how I do my demos, just because I'm repeating, just so there's some movement. There's like the variation that gets played, like the third and fourth repetition or whatever, and then maybe I'll like go into like a B section. But you're mostly you like have ideas and then they get kind of brought together into sections later, it sounds like.
Yeah, like very often, and like sometimes it's something that I came up with while I was exploring the pedal, or it's something that's just like out of the vault. Because I mean, like any songwriter, I've got a hard drive full of like 30 seconds of a song
Yeah.
that's just never going to be finished. And so that actually turned out to be quite helpful when I started doing this. Was like, oh, I've got this whole bank of riffs here that I can just throw into stuff
Right.
and start with. So yeah, it was nice to find a use for all that stuff. And maybe that's just end of life for that piece that I wrote whenever ago, or it's just like the start of forming it into something new. So that's cool too. But yeah, like it's a sort of a free form process, but I do definitely have like a kind of a structure that I tend to follow for most things. Sometimes I go and like kind of venture beyond that, but like very often it's like an intro, like kind of a heavy sort of hook, and then maybe a quote unquote verse section. And like I've always written songs with like vocals in mind, because I've always been into the sort of traditional band model
Right.
with vocals. And so yeah, I hear that in my head whenever I write a song, whether it's for a video or just for whatever. And so yeah, it's very often just like an intro, verse, bridge, chorus kind of thing. And that turned out to work really well for most things, where it's like I know I want to showcase this in a heavier context, and then maybe with some cleaner guitars, and then from there it's kind of informed by whatever the pedal does, as far as any other like sounds or ideas that I might explore within that song.
Right. Yeah. That's really interesting. The thing that's always like my brain has struggled with about writing a song for a demo is and we talked about different formats. I had thought about and tried to do a format that was basically just let me write a song, and so it's not a demo, it's just a song with the pedal.
Yeah.
And I struggled with just having everything be built around the one pedal, because I will want to like
Yeah.
change what dirt pedal I'm using for like, doubling guitars, and, have everything have like a unique like place in the arrangement. And so that's where like I feel like it's like a task that I'm not capable of having the thing all focused on the one pedal. But it sounds like kind of the way you do that is not, okay, well, let me have the rhythm guitar with a slow chorus and the lead with a fast chorus. It's more, here's like the list of what the pedal can do that I want to show, and let me
Yeah. Yeah.
pick sections, or like, like structure it around basically the 4 sections are 4 different examples, not necessarily multiple examples happening at once.
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly that. Like I guess I think of it kind of like building horizontally versus building vertically.
Right.
Like there's some things where I'll do like an overdub for like a double track, a dirt pedal. Like that's kind of just a no-brainer how I would record almost any track.
Yeah.
Whether it's a demo or not. But yeah, there's like sometimes it just doesn't make sense to layer tracks in to get different sounds out of it. Some people do that really well. I don't tend to like it, just because I want each section to breathe and kind of just show what I'm trying to show without too much distraction, especially because at least for YouTube, like it kind of only works to have like the playing in frame, and then I like to put the little settings illustrations on there, so I can
Right.
really only have like one thing on screen at a time.
Yeah.
before it starts getting to be a bit much, both for a viewer and both for me editing. So, yeah, I try to simplify in that way and just kind of keep things going laterally. So, yeah, each section is more or less for a different sound or maybe a couple different sounds that layer in.
Right. I mean, that makes so much sense. And it's, I think between that and us talking about, the how you edit and, aren't playing the track live in the actual video, it's like that speaks to the magic of when it all comes together. I watch the videos and take in the track as like, this is a full song where a lot is happening and you're playing it right now. And, it like once you break it down, it's like, oh, this really is like, you're kind of doing like condensed demo within that track in a way that never, because I think like Will Bennett, his videos, because
Yeah.
he specifically, it's only one guitar sound happening at once, and he names like the sound. That to me, I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. It's, or I guess maybe like the rhythm guitar will duck down and then the lead comes in as the next sound or something like that. But it's one thing
Yeah.
happening
Yeah.
as the focus. And so like that, I was like, okay, my brain sees that this is just like, here's 3 demo sections in 1 minute clip. But your videos are that, and my brain takes it in as like an actual song. And like, oh, this
I'm
pedal
glad to hear
sounds
that.
cool. So yeah, it's like it's magic. It's like a little bit of like sleight of hand of all the pieces come together to like really convey something more than just, oh, here's this sound and then this sound.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's always just been my goal is like if I'm gonna write a track, if I'm gonna spend time doing that, and it's a lot of time, like I want it to be something that like I feel good about, that feels like something I would write even if it wasn't for a video. Like I don't want it to necessarily read like a backing track jam.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's a great way to show things. And I think like what Will does is really clever. Where I think if he didn't label those 3 sounds in his format, like yeah, I think it would be more or less what I do with mine. It's just kind of the difference of how we present them
Right.
versus say like Megan is really great at layering a ton of different stuff, and you visually see all of it. But I
Right.
guess the fact that you can see all the chains, like your brain kind of picks out where those things are. So yeah, that's the interesting thing about the video, like medium, is just being able to frame, no pun intended, like what you're doing in the audio.
Yeah. I mean, it's that's a really good way of saying it, because I think I got that thought of how do you put together this track with all these layers from watching Megan's videos, because that's what she does. But she's laying it out very clear. And then, just not even drawing the line of your videos and Will's videos are basically or the track portion of your videos and his videos are basically the same
Yeah.
idea. And it's something about how like that presentation plays so much into it. And it's interesting when I've talked to other people who make demos, everyone always kind of says like, oh, well, this was the only way that demos make sense to me. Like I thought I did what everybody does, and it's always so different from the outside. And
Yeah.
so like, that's kind of fascinating to me of like what I do, that was just, it was not really planning. I was kind of copying knobs a little bit, but playing how I play.
Sure.
And, it just sort of made sense to me. I didn't see any difference from any of the other, like there was a bunch of pedals and a couple other people who were doing the top down videos at the time, and it was like I'm just doing the
Yeah.
same thing. And then I feel like I see that now with like all these, all of you that are making tracks, or even some other demo people with different formats. It's like it's so easy to be like, well, I just make demos. That's what everybody does, right? But from just the viewer's
Yeah.
standpoint, it's like that's so different. Like it's a very different experience of watching, everybody's
Totally.
different videos.
Yeah, and like that's another really interesting thing about the whole just like content kind of ecosystem to me is like I remember not too long ago I was just kind of browsing like the guitar pedals subreddit, and like I would periodically see threads from people who are like, I want to get into making demos, like what do you want to see? And those threads are kind of hilarious because literally all the answers are different.
Right.
Like you got people who are like, yeah, do you like kind of just like some talking on the overview, and then you got some people who are like, no talking, show all the knobs all the way. And it's like, no, just do like something quick, hit the highlights. Like it's all over the place, and like the only thing you can conclude is there's no right way to do it. There's just so many different people who consume information differently. Like some people want a really guided kind of editorialized experience versus someone who just wants to see the full range of a knob with some text on screen, doesn't want to hear
Right.
someone talk about it. Like, and they're all valid ways to go about it. So
Yeah.
it's really cool because then if I were to answer those people, it'd be like, just do what you want to see because someone out there wants to see that.
Yeah, of course. And it's like I would, I fell victim in my first couple of years of like the Instagram poll, like, oh, what, like, should I add to my, like, start doing in my videos next? Or like, do you want to see a different thing? And it's like,
Yeah.
always the answers are like both, like, like you said, talk and don't talk. It like everybody wants the opposite of each other. So you kind of just have to pick what feels right and do it. But I was one of the, I want to see the full range of the knob people. And that was part of my mission
Yeah. Yeah.
when I started
Same.
making videos. And now, after doing this for 6 years almost,
Yeah.
my
You've been at it for a
lesson,
while.
yeah, it's been a long time. It's kind of crazy to think. Um, my big lesson is you don't want to hear the full sweep of the knob because so much of it is like, oh yeah, I like the difference between like 3 o'clock and all the way. If I don't show it, there's probably not a difference, like,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
a meaningful difference. It's, more gain or whatever, but it's not like you got to hear this because like I like what I try to do on the like control sweep sections now is like with gain, I do like, you know, um, 9 o'clock, noon, 3 o'clock, or like split that into 4 sections. But like it doesn't have to hit everything because like there's not gigantic differences. But then you watch the demo and you're like, oh, but what if it went like a little bit further, you know?
Yeah, like very rarely is it like, oh, you think this is cool at 2 o'clock? Just wait till you hear 2:30.
Right.
Like that, just for very few things are like that. And yeah, I am definitely, I'm definitely guilty of putting myself through the trouble of showing the sweeps of everything when, even when I know, like as I'm doing it, like this doesn't matter. Like nobody cares about that little window. So I'm trying to let that go. But yeah, I was definitely the kind of person who wanted to hear like every little bit, just because I feel like I want to feel like I got the full picture. When
Yeah.
now that I've played a lot of stuff, and so I try to be sensitive to this too. But it's just that I've played so much stuff that now I have a feel for like, yeah, it doesn't matter. And the other thing is just that it also, like, people ask about what your setup is or like if you EQ'd things or
Right.
any of that. And I've been wanting to make a video on this, but I've just been holding it because it feels a little ambitious for someone who's like a fairly small fish
Yeah.
like me. Like, I don't want to be that guy who's like, you're doing it wrong to everyone in the guitar world. But it's like, it doesn't matter 90% of the time what you hear in the demo. Like, you're gonna get maybe 85% of the way there in your own rig just because you're a different player. You're hearing it in the room. You're hearing it like versus hearing it through your computer speakers
Yeah.
or God forbid your phone, which, like, I'm not judging. I listen to demos through my phone.
Yeah.
Like,
Pretty
I
much
admit it.
only. That's how I watch them.
Yeah. But yeah, like it's maybe I can see how it's frustrating, but it's also liberating to just know, like, whatever you hear, like, just take that as a ballpark and like an impression. And I get that's kind of tough because it's hard to ask someone to like buy like a $200-300 pedal without feeling like they got the full picture. But yeah, when I do stuff, I just hope that people can trust I'm giving them the picture that I think they need to see of it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of starting to change a little bit. There were a lot more like posts on Reddit or on the Gear page or whatever a few years ago, like, oh, they all use compression so the videos sound better than in real life. And it's like, I use compression on my videos. There's a video I made like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago now, where I walk through exactly what plugins I use, the settings, everything, like from start to finish, how I make a video. The compression I use is really subtle. It's an enjoyable experience to watch on your phone or on your computer speakers, and not just
Yeah.
a pet peeve of mine is when people say like you can only listen to this through headphones. Like put I always would laugh, and that's on like a Bandcamp like page, and it's like the members of the band are this, like, headphones advised to listen to this, and it's like I would advise listening to everything with headphones or with good speakers, but like if you don't want to do that, like I have good speakers, and most of the time I listen to music either from my phone speaker or in my car or from a Bluetooth speaker, because that's when I'm listening to music. And so it's like
Yeah.
I'm trying to kind of fill all those possibilities with that tiny bit of compression, and even like drastic EQ changes or whatever is not going to fix the pedal or make it sound different, because the clean tone would sound different. It's just shaping a guitar to sound. Recorded guitar doesn't sound like it does in real life. So we're just trying
Yeah.
to recapture that feeling.
Totally. And I mean, I've also realized it's also just different crowds who care about things
Yeah.
like that. Or maybe like I recently started doing work for Dunlop, like MXR, way huge. And I realized like that's been a good experience. They're really great to work with. They've been super accommodating of like my schedule and just getting me things. But yeah, it's a very different crowd. It's people who maybe don't necessarily get as deep into gear as some of us in the more like enthusiast niche do. So there's a lot more like really basic questions like, where do you put this in your chain? Or people who are like, if you put this, or if you show this with another pedal, like that doesn't help me. Or like, well,
Right.
do you play with one pedal at a time? Like, usually not, I think. And so yeah, it can be frustrating, but like I get it. People come from totally different backgrounds and like come into this knowledge totally different ways through different people. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge, especially when it gets to be like demoing things for completely different audiences. But I'm thankful to be able to do things in my style for an audience that I think, as far as like MXR stuff in particular, like there's just not a ton of representation
Yeah.
of like quote unquote alternative music in demos. And at least now, and at the time, like before I started my page, like there was very little like period. It was just
Right.
I remember seeing like your videos, like Stefan Pedal Zone, Megan, Brandon at Noise Generator. Like y'all were kind of the go-to people for me as someone who plays more like decidedly alternative stuff. And
Yeah.
it's really cool that there's so much more out there now, so many more people making demos in different styles, because like that was such an unfilled need before.
Absolutely. And I mean, even those that you just named, we all play very different genres within the broad umbrella of alternative. And,
Yeah,
the fun thing that you kind of have already said about making demos is you don't have to stick with one style or, always play things that are cohesive as you would with a band. And so there is like kind of variation within everybody's what everybody's focus and subgenre is and everything. But what
yeah,
you do is so distinct from what any of the channels you named do. And I haven't seen another channel that does the same thing that you do still. And so, I mean, it's amazing to have, especially that then you be able to show that for, something that is like fully outside of the, like you said, the really enthusiast niche and be like, yeah, here's like whenever I see someone do a boss pedal or you've done some of this stuff with MXR, and those are like or I guess maybe the Fender pedals that come out, but those are kind of more.
yeah,
Most of them are in the more like budget range, and so maybe
sure.
that's kind of covering a lot of people. But it's like a Boss pedal or MXR. That's like you can just walk into Guitar Center and buy it. That's like the average guitarist is interested, and so it's cool to have it like bleed out and have those companies know that it's not just the blues noodling or the classic rock or whatever styles are, however you would describe that kind of bigger guitar thing, to have something more alternative and focused on a very specific playing style.
Yeah, yeah, and I've been super thankful just to have, I mean, really any companies, any builders, like just trust me to show the stuff that they make, that they put their time and energy into, for what's ultimately a pretty niche style that I play. I mean, like there's absolutely people who play all that stuff. Like I would never claim it's original. Like just go listen to any of the bands in like the playlists I put together. Like you see
Yeah.
directly where a lot of it came from. But yeah, for some reason there's just never really been a ton of representation. Like maybe because some of those genres like kind of skew younger towards people who maybe don't have gear money yet,
Yeah.
or things like that, or they just don't really place as much importance in gear. But
Yeah. Oh, I also
but
wonder
yeah,
if,
yeah,
like, I actually, you didn't say, but I kind of have assumed that you've played in bands before getting to this
yeah,
point,
yeah,
and talking to Simon, who does Tunnel of Reverb,
yeah,
and a lot of us that do this kind of big umbrella of a genre. It's the type of music where there's active DIY scenes. And so if
Oh
you
yeah.
play music, you can play in a band and play shows. And so like you can go on tour, like you can do it all. And maybe some of the like what's typically represented in like guitar YouTube is the kind of thing where you are maybe showing up to the like club that does like, you know, the jazz night, and you're trying to just network so you can sit in on the gig and become a session player or whatever. It's like a very different thing. And so that's just another prong of, while I'm trying to get my name out there, I can start a YouTube channel. But
Yeah.
it seems like both you and I, and I know Noise Generator and Tunnel of Reverb, all of us came to this a little bit later because we were playing in band. Like, you know, it didn't cross our mind as much because it was like, well, I could spend time making music to put on YouTube, or I could go play shows and like do stuff out in the world. And that's, you know, so accessible to what we do.
Yeah, and that is very true. Like I didn't do the band thing quite to the level that that I think 18-year-old me would have aspired to. Like I didn't do any like proper touring other than like maybe playing some out of town shows or like going on a weekend trip. But I've played.
I think if it's
I've
3
played in
days,
handful of
it's a
bands.
tour. I think it counts.
Okay, that I've like arguably gone on tour.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, yeah, that's very much my background. Very much DIY, and I try to be totally transparent. Like when people ask me like studio questions or like kind of technical things, like I'll try to answer, but I will have no problem saying like, honestly, this is just the way that I learned to do it when I was like hacking shit together with my band in our garage.
Yeah.
That's just always how that's just always been my music experience, is just figuring things out on my own or with my friends when we're trying to put together a record or just a song, whatever.
Right.
But yeah, like that is interesting. That's a kind of a demographic I have not really thought of, is like people coming from that scrappier background. And I don't know why I haven't thought about it that way.
I didn't
yeah,
really
it's
fully until you kind of like got the idea started, and then I was like, oh wait, like this makes sense. So 'cause I've thought about the difference of like those two experiences as a guitarist, because I have coworkers who do, like, I have one coworker who is a really successful session musician and like gets all these cool gigs, but they're like the session guitar, you know, he's like not writing music with any of these bands that he's played with. And that's like a working guitarist. But, you know, that is just like, the more I talk to him, and like, you know, we've been working together for a couple of years now. And so it's like our experiences are so different that it makes me think about that. But you kind of got the seed in there of like, oh, wait, here, like maybe this kind of explains it. So yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I guess maybe I haven't thought of it just because to me, like that just is the audience. I think it's more that I never really considered how many people are playing like session or doing session work or playing like kind of just open mic gigs or just like hopping into a jam or just something just not the experience that I had playing music in like small venues with awful sound, maybe not even a sound person. Like that's just always been the default, because that's what my music experience was like coming up in suburban California. Just playing those little venues, like that's just what music is to me. But
Me too.
It was surprising. I did an Instagram poll a while ago just asking like how many of y'all like gig and like play with bands regularly, or like how many of you just record songs at home, or how many of you just like literally just jam by yourself and just enjoy playing.
Yeah.
And like kind of a shocking number, like just play at home. And
Yeah.
like that's really cool because I get it now that I'm 31 and I don't have that much, like I don't have time to tour. Like I for sure
Right.
don't have time to do that. I can make time. I will make time to make music in some way. But yeah, like I think that's really cool that people are so heavily into this, even though their outlet is really just jamming in their spare time when they're not taking care of like a family or working a job. But yeah,
Right.
it's a very different kind of context for it.
It really is. And yeah, that was something it took me a bit to wrap my head around because I was always wanting to play in a band or then put that energy into videos or, you know, like doing something, trying to write music. And the funny thing is now, if you asked me, all I do is jam alone at home. I'm in a band, but we
Yeah,
practice like once every other month, and
yeah,
so it's like that just fits into life easier. It's less work.
yeah,
So yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
yeah. I'm just getting back into to playing with people. Like last summer, I joined just like a cover band with some friends, and it's all like early 2000s like radio pop punk and emo, so
Yeah.
like everything that would play at an emo night if you went to
Right.
one now. And so it's super low maintenance. We get together like once a month if that, when everyone's actually available. But it's always fun, and it's interesting is like we're playing ampless, which I've
Oh
never
yeah.
done. And like at least for now we are, because that's just easy. We have an electronic kit at our bassist's place, and it's super easy to just get everyone plugged in, get the levels, and just jam. And I never thought I would like that, but it's nice.
Yeah.
It's really fun, and it's just fun to not have to think about writing songs. It's just playing these old songs we love.
Oh yeah. I've thought about that. There was a period where I was trying to like really learn how to play bass, and I was doing what I did when I first learned how to play guitar, which was just pulling up a tab for a song and trying to play along. And it's like there's so much fun in just doing that. Like,
Yeah.
I got so stuck in like, oh, I want to write music and I want to, do all these things and I want to get good at playing this way and this way. And it's like it's fun just to like some people have already written great guitar parts that are fun to play. It's fun to learn that and just get good at that.
Yeah, yeah, and like I honestly, I need to kind of deliberately tell myself to go just learn a song from someone else, just because I spend so much time writing things myself, like kind of in a vacuum, that
Yeah.
I need to pull in to just some influence from somewhere else, or just not play the same chords that I've been playing for weeks on end. Like just do something different. So yeah, like that's just the other side of the coin for me.
Yeah. So I think we're getting near the end of the episode. So I've got
Yeah, yeah,
one last question that kind of ties into that, and it's one of those difficult questions of like, oh, how are you going to narrow it down? But it doesn't have to be too
yeah.
complex of an answer. But I'm just curious if you could name like 3 or 4 of your big influences for like how you play guitar or the type of music that you play.
Yeah, yeah.
So, not an exhaustive list, but just kind of like the big ones that come to your mind
Sure.
that influence you.
Yeah, I mean the one I'm like most transparent about and maybe obnoxious about sometimes is Title Fight.
Yeah.
And you're familiar. I think we came up in kind of similar scenes. I think, or at
Yeah.
least like kind of peripheral to each other or adjacent. But yeah, like I got really into Title Fight when I was just about to graduate high school. So like they were and like we're the same age, I think.
Yeah.
So it was cool, kind of like growing up with them because
Yeah.
they're just a really interesting band to me because they were doing like the kind of scrappy hardcore pop punk thing back in what 2010 2009 or so,
Right.
but they had such a distinctly different take on it. Like they have those like kind of half step bends that are just all over what I play, and that came directly from them. And just the chord voicings that they use, a lot of
Definitely.
like major seventh chords. Those, yeah, that they kind of just like took my whole vocabulary of guitar stuff at the time and just threw it out and replaced it for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so yeah, Title Fight, bands like them or Basement that were big at the time. Yeah, I picked up a lot of stuff from them. So they're the easiest influence to point to, at least for most of what I do now. Another one is definitely Seosin, Bo Burchell,
Yeah.
particularly, who that's been really cool. Is actually like I did work with Balaguer guitars with Mark Johnston and Andrew from Ambient Endeavors, helping them put together guitar, and Bo is one of their artists, and so he kind of reached out and just said hey a while ago,
Oh,
and so
wow.
that was really cool. I'm like, dude, you're like a high school hero.
Yeah. That's amazing.
But yeah, and he had a very distinct style as far as that, like kind of mid 2000s post hardcore style, where it was very like emotive and melodic, but it was really heavy, and there was like a distinct metal influence to it. So yeah, I play a lot of stuff where I like to think some of that comes through, where it's a little riffier, more like kind of chuggy, if you will, as chuggy as
Right.
I get, at least. But yeah, his playing's definitely been an influence as far as the stuff that I play on the channel. Man, I think like the last one is kind of just like a very broad, like math rock Midwest emo influence.
Right.
I can't say I listen to like a ton of bands. I've never really gotten super deep in either of those genres, but just like Yvette Young and Dylan from Tiny Moving Parts are just a couple of players who I remember hearing early on when they were starting out and just thinking like, oh, they are doing something totally different from what I know. Like I want to do some of that. So anywhere you hear like tapping noodly riffs come in, like a lot of that comes from just kind of that general realm.
Right. I mean, that's so interesting. I mean, those three, I feel like it's like, you're right. I kind of was, for some reason, I was thinking balancing composure as opposed to title fight.
Totally.
But, same,
Yeah.
same thing. But, title fight kind of covered more ground. But yeah, then it's like, even though I wouldn't have named Seosin or Tiny Moving Parts, as like just that broad, like here's the kind of three buckets that your sound is kind of combining. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I'm literally looking at a balancing composure like flag on my wall right now. So yeah, it's like, yeah, that kind of, I was just very into the kind of crossover bands of that like run for cover emo pop punk era when we were in college.
For sure.
Like not necessarily the fully pop punk bands or hardcore ones, but just like the ones that kind of sat off on their own doing a little of both or a little of everything, but they were just kind of lumped in with those bands because they were on Run for Cover or just other labels like that.
Right.
I've always really liked bands that kind of cross over in that way that you are tough to define. Yeah, and like Title Fight and Balance and Composure being a couple of them. Oh, and I forgot the one other like kind of left field, but I guess it won't be left field when you think about it. But like Billy Joe Armstrong was probably like the first guitarist that was like, I want to play like that. And so like, yeah, I remember very well hearing like American Idiot in like 7th grade or something, and just being like, this is totally different from like how I've listened to guitar music, or from guitar music that I've listened to. And like to this day, I still kind of like play kind of the same strumming patterns and like letting open chords kind of just like screech with hot P90s like that. I love that kind of thing. And like the Marshall sound like that, that's all very Green Day, as far as my influences. So that's the last one for me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's anyone our age who can say that plays alternative music of any kind that can say they didn't like want to learn how to play Boulevard of Broken Dreams or any song of American Idiot. So
yeah, they're lying. Like I can play Jesus of Suburbia now, all of it.
yeah.
I haven't in years, but I know I can.
Yeah. Yeah, them and My Chemical Romance. That was like the beginning of guitar for me.
Dude.
And I played a My Chemical Romance like cover set for a Halloween years ago. And so that's a band where it's like, if I tuned my guitar to standard, I could just play through like an album and a half's worth of songs because I spent enough time when I was young and then again later trying to learn them all.
Dude, and that's no small feat after playing with this cover band. Like we're playing I'm Not Okay and Helena, and I'm just like, oh, some of this is kind of hard.
Yeah.
Like
real hard.
Yeah, like I really didn't appreciate how good like musicians My Chem were like back when they were popular.
They kind of got a bad rep just from the whole emo eyeliner thing. They got really caught up in all that. But yeah, there's, I mean, the song Thank You for the Venom, which is on Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge. That song is like insane riffing. What's crazy about that band is the one guitarist, Frank, is like an insane, like metal, hardcore, screamo, like riff player. And then the other guitarist, Ray, is like a classic rock shredder. And so there would be like an insanely difficult riff. And then over top of that, an insanely difficult solo, but it's in a completely different style. And so like juggling all of that in one cohesive band, it's like they clearly were spending like they weren't just throwing this stuff together, but it's cool to look back on. And I think Green Day too, I think they got a bad rep for a different reason, for kind of selling out punk and then kind of getting a little corny. We can admit it with American Idiot, even though I love that album.
True.
But I go back and listen to them a lot now, and like Mike Dirnt, the bass parts are like crazy.
Oh yeah.
And then
love them.
Just like the chord progressions and like how they write the kind of melody into the chord progression, and it all just kind of makes sense. It's not just like, oh yeah, we're doing the Ramones, 3 chords and we're good. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and they're one of those bands where like if you get into them young and are really into them, like that's just the kind of influence that just kind of sticks with you for like the rest of your music making life, like whether you're conscious of it or not. Like I look at some songs that I've written like years after I was into Green Day, and they there are things I can point to and we're like, that sounds like a Green Day like melody or a structure or just the way that I was strumming that progression. Like, yeah, it's really wild how that stuff kind of pervades everything you do when you get into it early enough.
Yeah, it really is. And that's like the lasting power of a good band, is you get into
Yeah.
them young and it's not like a guilty pleasure when you get older.
Yeah. Yeah.
So cool. I think we can wrap up the episode with that. So thank you so much, Matt, for taking the time to do this, the podcast with me. If you want to tell everyone where they can find you on YouTube and Instagram, everything like that, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Ambienttrash. I'm on YouTube at Ambienttrash and some numbers because Ambienttrash is a like dad prog rock band that got there first.
Wow.
But everywhere else, I'm Ambienttrash, and yeah. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everyone for listening. If you want to join the Discord, the Collector Emitter Discord, I know Matt also hangs out in there sometime talking pedals, but also movies and TV and all kinds of the off-topic stuff we get into. So you can say hi to him there. But yeah, thank you for listening, everyone. And thank you for the continued support here on Patreon. And talk to you again soon in a bonus episode in a couple of weeks.